A human rights activist, Declan Ihekari, is here with us for more analysis. It's good to see you on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
So, do you see this pardon by the Somalia's regional president as a step in the right direction?
Of course, it's a step in the right direction. There's no way you want to create an atmosphere of peace while you are being unjust to certain people. Don't forget that the people that were incarcerated were people who were unjustly arrested for asking for what they ought to have asked, asking for a just society, and for a government to clamp down on them, and the same government to say they want to have peace in the nation. There's every necessity for those detainees to be released unconditionally, and in the same society, they should also be compensated.
Well, but what do you make of their arrest in the first place?
There was no basis for the arrest. What you find is that most African leaders detest people who say things or who go against certain policies and action of theirs. So they will always have a way of curtailing the society, curtailing the people, the citizenry, in order not to work against their own personal interest. And that leads to a situation where you have people who get into power at all means, who doesn't have the mandate of the people. Because if you have the mandate of the people, there will be no basis for you to start, arresting and detaining such people, knowing fully that at the end of a particular tenure, you will surely come back for them. So you find out that they do all these things just on their own, just to make sure that they silence the voice of the people that they intend serving.
We're talking about the voice of the people now. Do you see them backing down on their demands, even with these arrests that have...
There is no good protester that must back down on a legitimate demand. Every legitimate demand must be followed by an illegitimate attack. And the illegitimate attack is the incarceration. And if the people know that what they are doing is right and they are well united, they will surely win the struggle. Already they are winning the struggle. And they should not just relent. They should just continue.
What about Hail Mariam Desalegns' resignation? Do you think that that would also help to ease the political turmoil in that country?
Yeah, I want to give it to the Prime Minister. He has done what most African leaders would not want to do. You find out that in Africa, even when a president is misruling, he finds it difficult to vacate the seat. But he has done that successfully. I just want to say it is a step in the right direction. Since he has done it, he has created an avenue for peace talk in Somalia.
Now let's look at the Oromo and Amharic communities who have always complained about marginalization by governments. Is there any sight to this violence between these communities?
There can't be any side to the end of the violence. Bearing in mind that the Oromos, are the largest ethnic community, followed by the Amaras, and in government of Ethiopia today, you find out that these two does not even have much say in the government. The people that occupy the seat of government in Ethiopia or in Somalia are the Tigrays, and they are the fourth in terms of population, in terms of everything in Somalia. So you find out that these two largest ethnic community who always feel sense of unbelonging. How can we be so big? How can we have all these resources and yet we don't have a say in the government? And so I want to believe that by the stepping down of the Prime Minister and by the reforms working towards peace moving in that country, they should be able to make sure that power in that country goes to everybody and the country becomes one and for all, not for the few.
But do you see that happening?
It should happen. It should happen. Because if you watch the terrain, you cannot silence the voice of the oppressed forever. The oppressed will always have a way of revolting. The two communities the ethnic communities you have mentioned now, they are the largest. And you don't use all their resources, use everything from them, and yet you don't give them what belongs to them. It's happening everywhere. And that's why you find agitations here and there, even in Nigeria. But what should be done is that everybody must benefit from the natural and the commonwealth of a country. And that's what they're fighting for.
Now, looking at the case in Sudan, of course, some protesters were also arrested last month for, protesting over the situation of the country, although some of them have been released. And then looking at what happened in Ethiopia as well. But do you see their release, though, as their right?
Well, every release of a protester unconditionally shows that the protester knows what he or she is fighting for. It happened in Nigeria some time ago where a lot of people were clamped into jail, and at the end of it all, there were agitations here and there, and they were released. So it shows the weakness on the part of the government. It's only a weak government that want to clamp down on dissent voices. You see, you have word and opposite. If the government feel what they are doing is right, and somebody is saying what you're doing is wrong, a reasonable government should listen to that person and balance situations, not clamping down on that person, not saying that what the person is saying is nonsense, not saying that the person is an enemy of the government. You don't do that. There should be freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom to express your will to the government. As a matter of fact, the people voted the government. They put the government there. So they should have their say. So any attempt to clamp down the dissent voices that are seeing things wrong, it amounts to criminality as far as we're concerned.
But with the release of these, those who were arrested, do you think that the government has probably learned its lesson and is ready to listen to the people?
Well, with the release, don't forget there are still more people in detention until they release everybody unconditionally. After release them unconditionally, they should also compensate them. When you compensate them, bring their leaders to round table and begin to discuss. But if you don't release all, you release just few, because you feel those few are the most powerful. I think they are doing the wrong thing. I think one of the big people that were released was saying that he has a lot of people still incarcerated, that he is not happy being out while others are there. So the government should release everybody at this point in time if they're actually interested in having a peaceful nation.
Well, many thanks, human rights activist Declan Ihekari, for joining us on Network Africa.
You're welcome.
Now, United Nations investigators say they have identified more than 40 South Sudanese military officers who may be responsible for war crimes against humanity. This is a sharp departure from previous UN reports that only document crimes but not the perpetrators. The investigators from the UN Commission on Human Rights said their findings are based on interviews with hundreds of witnesses, satellite imagery, and nearly 60,000 documents dating to the outbreak of the war.
There are victims that we've spoken to and who have given testimony to us who have been mutilated, gang raped, often by up to a dozen men, if not more. And sometimes relatives were first forced to watch, sometimes children were forced to watch, sometimes children were forced to engage in the rape themselves and even kill. There have been massive violations across the country of the right to food, the right to education, and millions driven from their homes. We will be handing over not just the report to the Human Rights Council, but a confidential dossier with the names of those that we think should be investigated by the future prosecutor of this hybrid court. And indeed, the crimes that have been committed are crimes under international law and could be prosecuted even in other countries outside of South Sudan if the perpetrators were found there.
Still to come on the program, on our Africa Tech segment, we'll look at emergence of financial technology across Africa. Do stay with us.